everybody, today's topic is one of my favorite things to discuss, tracking macronutrients. Now, this has been coming up so much in my clients' lives, in my friends' lives, is this topic of tracking macronutrients. For all of you that know me, you know that I am not about following diets. I am not about counting calories. I'm not about writing down what we eat or measuring our food. So when I hear people talking about tracking macronutrients and being so rigid, I immediately start to listen to what's really going on in the background behind. What I mean is, oftentimes when people resort to tracking macronutrients or they become very fixated on tracking their food and counting calories, there's more to the story than meets the eye. There's something else going on that's caused them to resort to restrictive eating. Now, in terms of calorie counting, it's pretty safe to say that most people agree that this is an outdated method because not all calories are created equal. There are still people out there, there's still health professionals talking about tracking calories and counting calories and making sure we don't go over and above this amount of calories, but the consensus kind of is that calories are not what we need to be looking at. And so what people have started doing, because they've realized that not all calories are created the same, is they've started to look at the macronutrient profile that people are consuming. And when someone's consuming too many carbs or too much fat or too little protein or too much protein, then our diet and our health gets all out of whack. And so now we've taken a liking to tracking our macronutrients and we've just switched over our unhealthy relationship with calories to macronutrients. Tracking macronutrients is not bad in and of itself. It's a tool in your toolbox, but it's not meant to be used for a long time. Tracking macronutrients can help someone who has absolutely no clue about nutrition. It can help them get on a right track, but when we maintain tracking our food and writing everything down and staying restrictive, we take ourselves out of body wisdom and we put ourselves into restrictive eating. If we stay in restrictive eating for too long, we will fight back against the system that we were never meant to follow in the first place. I get so passionate when I hear people talking about tracking macronutrients and weighing and measuring food, and I see myself where I was 5 years ago, and probably from the age of 17 till I was about 25, I was in that same boat as well. I was so strict with the way that I ate. I tracked everything. To this day, I know what most foods have for their calorie count, for their protein count, for their carbohydrate count, for their fat count, for their sugar count. Everything with food was about numbers, and it wasn't about listening to what my body really needed. So I stayed in restrictive eating patterns, which includes tracking macronutrients. I stayed in those patterns for years and years and years, and I never developed a healthy relationship with food, first and foremost. But secondly, I never learned how to listen to my body. It seems that we have so many different systems that try to get us to not listen to what our body actually needs, because these systems claim to know better than we know. And then we start to believe that we don't know what's best for us when really we do. All the years that I tracked my macronutrients and calories and weighed and measured my food, I was pretty miserable. I developed a very unhealthy relationship with food. I was afraid of food. I was afraid to eat. I was afraid to add any kind of variety into my diet because let's face it, when you're tracking every single thing that goes into your mouth, it takes a long time. You think it takes a long time to meal prep and think of new recipes to create. Think about how much time it then takes you to break down the macronutrients of those recipes and of those meals. It takes an inordinate amount of time. And this is one of the reasons that people just can't sustain it. It's not a sustainable way to eat. It's not a sustainable relationship with food. Like I said, I was miserable when I was tracking my food and weighing everything. And to be honest, I did not see results at all. Why? Because I was living in chronic stress. There's two types of stress: acute stress and chronic stress. There's actually more types of stress, but those are the two that we're going to focus on. The acute stresses in life are the things that happen suddenly, and we respond suddenly and we get over the stress response pretty quickly. Chronic stress is a stress that lasts a long time, and the longer it lasts, the more havoc it starts to wreak on our body. When we're looking at something like following diets or tracking macronutrients, all of these things are self-imposed stress that last on a chronic level. If you've ever noticed, when you're being really diligent about what you eat and tracking everything down and weighing yourself and doing everything right, you may find that your progress is very little, it's very slow. Now think about a time where you went away on vacation, you kind of let loose, you drank a little more than you normally do, you ate food that you normally wouldn't, and you didn't have that set schedule, you weren't worried about weighing or tracking or measuring or anything like that, and you actually lost weight. This doesn't happen to everyone, but this does happen a lot. Or you just didn't gain weight at all. And you have to think to yourself, why did that happen? When I was so diligent at home and I never saw progress, why did I go away on vacation and eat a bunch of foods that I deemed were bad or wrong, but I still either maintained my weight or even lost weight? It's because we're not living in chronic stress. When we are not living in stress, our body has the ability to digest, assimilate, and absorb nutrients. If we're not digesting our food properly, it doesn't matter how healthy a meal you're eating, you will not digest it, you will not absorb and assimilate those nutrients, and that food won't work for you. It will work against you. It's so important to realize this big factor when we're looking at our relationship with food. We have to have a relationship with food that doesn't cause us stress. And for the majority of people, I would probably wager to say 99.9% of people who weigh and track calories and macronutrients, they are keeping themselves in chronic stress that's self-imposed, that doesn't need to be there. When we can take ourselves out of that stress, learn to trust our body, tune into our body wisdom, and figure out what it's telling us to eat, that's when we really notice the biggest changes. Now, there's a difference between tracking macronutrients and making sure that we have macronutrient balance within our meals. The macronutrients that I'm talking about are proteins, fats, and carbohydrates. Those are our macronutrients that we want to aim to get at every single meal. There should be a balance of all of those macronutrients and tons of micronutrients, but we won't get into that, at each meal. If your meals are missing one of those macronutrients, it's not going to be a sustainable way of eating. Two of the biggest macronutrients that people are told to cut out are carbohydrates and fats. Protein seems to be quite elevated, and even fats are becoming more elevated, which is amazing because healthy fats are so good for us. But carbs have been a villain for a long time, and they still kind of are in a lot of different methods of eating, such as keto or paleo or low carb. So it's really important that when we're eating a balance of all three macronutrients, not cutting out one or the other, not elevating one over the other. They're all synergistically working with each other to create balance in our body, to create a healthy body. Carbs aren't bad, fats aren't bad, protein isn't bad. We have to make sure that we're eating the healthiest version of those three macronutrients. And then as you do that, it doesn't matter really the count of what you're eating, just make sure that you're eating all three. If this does not come naturally to you, if you still are afraid to trust yourself and you need to weigh and you need to measure your food because you just don't know how much is too much or how much is too little, that's okay. Take a step back, breathe a little bit, and start to ask yourself, how much of this do I need? How much quinoa in my salad do I need? How much chicken do I need? How much beans do you need? Whatever you're eating, you don't need to necessarily measure it. If you do want to measure it, grab a measuring cup and use it as a scoop to put it in your bowl or on your plate. But don't be neurotic about it. It's okay to measure some things, especially when we're following recipes. We need to measure things, but it's the intention behind measuring that makes the difference. Are you measuring everything to track it because you're living in a restricted way of eating, or are you simply measuring to follow a recipe or to just give yourself a rough guideline of how much you should be eating? I'm going to tell you right now, eating 3 ounces of chicken compared to 3.5 ounces of chicken, or even like 2.8 ounces of chicken, is not going to matter. Just make sure you have a protein, a healthy carb, a complex carb, tons of vegetables, a healthy fat every single time you eat, and you'll be okay. Your body will work for you. Now, when we cut out one whole class of food, one whole macronutrient, are we going to lose weight really quickly? Probably. Are we going to keep it off? Probably not. Is tuning into body wisdom and listening to what your body wants at any given time going to help you lose weight super fast? No. Are you going to keep the weight off that you lost? Yes, you will, because you're listening to your body, and your body's going to tell you when it's had too much, when it needs more, what it needs more of, when it needs it, and how much. This is really important. So, a long-winded response for macronutrient tracking is, I think that it's not a good idea. I think it's a road that leads to nowhere. And not actually, it doesn't lead to nowhere. It's a road that leads to a really unhealthy relationship with food. And I think when we can let go of that control and that restriction that we're trying to place on food and ask ourselves where in life we feel like we're lacking control, that we need to propel it onto food, then we can really figure out what that's really about and what our issues are really surrounding. Always ask yourself, why am I targeting food? Why am I trying to control food? Why am I trying to control my body or whatever aspect of life you're trying to control? Why am I doing it? Figure out that, get happy, get content, and that's when your eating challenges start to disappear. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please leave me a comment in the comment section below. Like this video, share it, and don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel, Jaded Nutrition. Thanks so much for watching, you guys. Have a good day. Bye-bye.